Hey, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Lowdown on Low Code. This is going to be a super cool episode. So hit that share button right now, hit the like button. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be really interested in this episode. It's going to be really fun for us here at analysis.tech because this is a little bit like, that movie where you got to get all the old people back together again to solve a problem. Got to get the Texas Rangers together and you kind of ride around to the old age home and the retirement communities and you gather up the posse and then they go off. Well, that's kind of like what we're doing today. So this is like what we would call, most of you won't get this reference. This is like Bill Blues from Days Gone By, getting together and talking about some pretty cool topics. So I'm Rob Koplowitz. I'm your host today for Lowdown on Low Code. I'm here with a couple of other folks from analysis.tech. Here with Andy Bartels, who hasn't been on in a while. How are you, Andy?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, good to have you. And John Rymer, who you have seen pretty frequently.
Thanks, Rob. And but no thanks for calling me old.
You are old. We're all. I mean, so the youngest one here by far is our guest today, and we're super excited to have an old friend, a colleague, someone we've all done research with, Julie Osk. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be back with the gang.
Yeah. So the reason we wanted to bring Julie on today is, look, we've all been really focused on this topic of agents and co-pilots, and there's been some really high-profile folks out there, Mark Benioff, Satya Nadella, and many others, of course, who are talking about how, agents, co-pilots, Gen AI in general, are going to completely change the application landscape, how a number of years from now, applications just aren't going to look the way they do today. And there's lots of pundits out there who are jumping on that bandwagon, but not a lot of folks really talking about how software will be developed and what that user experience will be like. And so not only is this something that Julie's doing research on, it's something where Julie has charted this, has been in this uncharted territory with mobile devices, with notifications, with all kinds of technologies in the past, and has always had a really keen eye for that. So this will be a good one, guys. Hey, John, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Julie, real pleasure to have you on the show, and very glad you're here. The way we like to start here, but it's kind of by way of introduction, is with our guest's backstory. And honestly, I kind of know some of your backstory, but maybe not all of it. So how did you get here? Particularly, how did you arrive at this focus you've had for such a long time on user experience with technology?
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for having me on. So I think, you guys know my background's in engineering and management consulting. And then I got my hands on this thing called a cell phone, probably from Ericsson or Nokia back in the late 90s. And I decided to move out to California because I wanted to work on this thing called mobile. And so then for the past 25 years, I thought about and researched and defined how mobile was going to impact consumer experiences and products and business models. And it's probably we can talk about transformational technologies, whether it's cloud or this or that, but mobile has been the most transformational technology that's impacted consumers' lives, let's say since the internet or computers. And then, I don't know, we're going back to electricity after that. And then Gen AI, AI has been around 50 years, right? We all know that, but Gen AI has been like the next thing that has really touched consumers. And so I feel extremely fortunate to be in a position where I've got time and it's the right moment to begin thinking about how will generative AI impact consumer experiences and products and change business models. And so that's what I'm fascinated by it. And I'm in 100% right now.
Hey, Julie, can I just ask for one more bit part of the story that I love that you didn't share today?
Yes.
Can you tell us about your trip to Africa?
Not which one. Okay. So the trip to Africa, yeah. What do we want to know about my trip to Africa?
How you were observing people with these cell phones.
Oh, yeah.
And your epiphany.
All right. So I thank you for bringing that up because it's also one of my favorite photographs I've ever taken, one of my other hobbies. But I've been very fortunate and I had the opportunity to go out to East Africa in 96 when I was finishing business school. And I had the chance to be in and among the Maasai Mara that live out in the plains. And they're basically, herding goats and cows and all of this. And then very fortunate to go back about 10 years later in 2006 when we had cell phones. They weren't, they're barely smartphones at that time. No offense to Nokia or Microsoft at the time. And was able to talk to folks and put the phones in their hands. I even left a phone behind. And you're right. I had this epiphany. This isn't just about, texting and communicating. When you start to think about internet access and billions of people getting access, now they have access to education and healthcare and banking. And it fundamentally changes the economics and the quality of the life of billions of people globally. And yes, thank you for bringing that up. That was one of my favorite moments, so to speak.
So for those of you who listen to Lowdown on Low Code, and we refer to this as the Trask moment, it's a reference to the movie Working Girl. And our clever little plot here in this part of the show is this is where we separate the BSers who kind of just stumbled into it from the people who have a real story and came into something with real passion and can tell a story that goes back 20 years that other people will jump on 20 years later. So
right.
That's one of my favorite Trask stories of all time, which is why I wanted to have you tell it. Yeah.
Rob, why don't you?
All right. Enough comedy jokes. Let's jump in. So, all right. So we're into this AI thing. I know John and I have been doing research on this topic from the perspective of application development. Andy's doing a lot of research on this from a more sort of uber skeptical position. I know that you're somewhere in between, Julie. But as we think about these things and how much things are going to change, we're at this point where we're looking for value, right? So where do you think we can find value in these technologies? Where should our listeners be thinking about applying their efforts to really start to just find some value from all these trends?
Yeah, so I think, Rob, this is a really interesting question because I think there's been a lot of what I'm going to call like push from the industry and like push from vendors about what AI can do for me. It can summarize, it can assist, it can categorize, it can write code, it can like do stuff. And we don't spend very much time talking about, well, what does the user actually need or what does the user want or like what does it give to me? And I think that's a good starting point for the conversation because I don't know how many times since you woke up this morning, Rob, you're like, well, I could use some summary today. I wish somebody could really categorize for me this morning.
This is what I need.
Right. You need something right now. Right. And so I did a study for a client last year to really look at what consumers give, what Gen AI gives to consumers. And I think this applies for any kind of user, any kind of a worker, whether you're an agent in a contact center or you're someone else. And there's 6 things. One, it can personalize. And as its ability to like hold context and as its memory grows, right, it can personalize for us. It gives us superpowers. Like it, we've all used it to do things like create cartoon strips or write music or create videos. In 50 years, I'm never going to figure that stuff out. So that's a superpower. Like fundamentally, it's enabling me to do something that I never could have done before. It's convenient. Third thing, it's convenient. It can edit text for me and do things like that. It offers what I would call comfort, right? There's a big category here of companionship and making people feel better. We can put that aside for now. It gives access, right? There's a lot of folks that just don't have access to services, whether it's legal, you go back to the mobile phone analogy where people in Africa didn't have access to healthcare and banking and education. Now we're talking about access to legal services or to healthcare services or to mental health services that people couldn't afford before. It wasn't local in their community. It wasn't in their language. It wasn't available 24/7. And then certainly the 6th thing is it can provide highly interactive, education or entertainment that's tailored to me. And so if you put that into the context of the employee, I think that's what we're also giving employees. So it's got to be in this context of what's in it for me as the person, as the employee, and how do I get value from it? And I think that's where we start.
So there's a lot of interesting things you just said there. There's lots of reasons to be optimistic, and of course, there's always reasons at this point in any sort of technology hype cycle to be skeptical. So let's turn things over to our curmudgeon colleague, Mr. Andy Bartels.
And we've missed you.
Thank
I
you.
haven't had
Thank you.
curmudgeon in a while. Let's go.
I'm going to try on that. A lot of what you talked about, Julie, are things that I think are important, which is to allow technology to enable people, especially workers. My focus is helping workers to the ones, and allow workers to control it. But the question is, how does that translate into economic value for companies? And this is where I get really worried,
Mhm.
because I think that a lot of the stuff which is out there, in effect, is kind of freeware for consumers, but someone's got to make money from it. And the question is how they're going to make money, and then what is the story they tell both to their customers, their business clients, as to how they're going to make money, and then what do the internal investors tell to their CEO about how they're going to make money. So how do you think this, how can they focus on what customers want, actually turn around into a legitimate business value, as opposed to smoking, waving hands in the air and AI washing everything and not being very specific. I mean, things which how does that translate to actual value propositions that
So,
a vendor can tell to customers, here's the real ones, and how customers can say, oh yeah, that's real and not hype.
all right. Well, I think there's like 10 questions in there, Andy, right? So let's
Let's
like,
focus on the one you
like
want to say.
break these down a little bit. So I think the first thing is I think there's a lot. If somebody said we have all the answers, I wouldn't believe them.
Good.
Right. But if we look back to, take a number like 1850, like 52% of Americans worked in agriculture. And today the number is 2%. So when technology innovation has come along in the past, we found like people have found other things to do, like cure cancer and make water cleaner and just do other things. Right. And all of us here grew up without computers, without the internet, without mobile phones. We all remember doing math with paper and pencil. And then I don't know, I didn't get my first screen till college, right? With things like Excel and Lotus 1, 2, 3, right? So I think we'll find, we can talk about a lot of the downsides of the things that we don't do anymore. And these tools become productivity tools. I don't think it necessarily means that there's fewer people in the workplace, but like I would say, as somebody who's working independently right now, the tools are amazing because and the beauty of it is they are running in the cloud. I can turn on Perplexity and get like a little research project going, and I can flip to another window and get Claude to do some editing, and I can go over to Dolly or Gemini and I can get some graphics going in another window. It's amazing what it can do, but I'm still, very busy and very occupied, all the days of the week. So I think that's one of the things that you asked is, what will the human beings do? And I think there's a lot of assumptions about replacing humans, which I don't agree with. I do think, just like in the history of time, as technology innovations come around, there's fewer people doing some things and we create new things for people to do. I'll pause for a moment.
Well, I just want to pick up on one of the points there. Our colleague Kate Leggett posted on LinkedIn that one of the vendors she's covered, I can't remember which one, claims that their AI agent can reduce customer service costs dramatically and potentially eliminate, look at a number, I think it's 80% reduction they were saying in costs of doing by shifting from people. Are those claims, you think, real or are they bogus?
So, I think so the first thing I would say is I think there's some challenges with saying it is or it isn't, right? There's so much context and there's so much nuance that has to go into every conversation. And so if you took, one company that, I don't know, like didn't have the right kind of automation in place and people were calling in to get really simple answers to very simple questions about where is my package or, can I get my prescription refilled? I don't know, they probably could be, resolving or handling 80% of those inbound calls or something like that. Right. But the other thing that history has shown us in the contact centers is the more you kind of automate and you use technology, you free up some of your more skilled people to tackle more difficult problems. So it's, I think there's probably a scenario that fits the description of what you just told me. And it's probably not like what's going on everywhere for sure.
Because
Well, thanks, Julie. Just a quick clarification. Much as we would love for Kate Leggett to be one of our colleagues, she is actually one of our former colleagues. But, Kate, if you ever want to know what's coming up next, back to you, Andy.
yeah, well, let me pass the baton back over to John to pursue another line of thinking here.
Thank you, Andy. So Julie, let's drill into the impact a little bit. One of the concerns that people have about AI, the current generation of AI, is that it will cost them their jobs. Some people are also concerned about surveillance and other things. But you've been doing some work to really drill into some specific roles. Particularly contact center. You've got some research out on that. I wonder if you could share, just how you're seeing these new AI tools really, advance those jobs as opposed to destroy them.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question, John, because right now I think there's also, and like if I take a step back from that, if I narrow it down more to generative AI, I think like a lot of things, it's going to evolve in phases, right? So the phase that we're in right now is what I would call it's enhancing what we do. We're not fundamentally doing new things for the most part. It's not replacing humans. It's not really replacing jobs. It's enhancing things. It's making, so this first phase is really enhancing what we do. Then it will displace, and it will displace not humans, but it probably will displace some jobs before we get to this AGI, fundamentally starts to do net new things. And so I think that there's a lot of roles in the contact center. And if you look at how Gen AI might be assisting or enhancing or making someone's job easier, for the most part, what it seems to be doing is taking away some of the more, I don't know if you call them like mundane task. It's so on one hand, it can summarize calls or it can summarize, hey, the interaction that the agent might just have had, whether it's over the phone or if it's through chat. It can do some more sophisticated things like sense my intent or sentiment, and it can route the call better. It can surface my customer history to the agent. So when they get on the phone, it's not like it's a first date, but it's meeting an old friend, and the conversation is more helpful and gets off the ground more quickly. A second category would be, we all call into call center, or, to get customer service. It's like, hey, your call may be recorded for like whatever, for, I don't even know what the phrase they use, right? And I think in the past, they would have done samplings of those calls. So now they can do, monitor or do quality assurance on all the calls to ensure there's compliance or the quality is good, the people are getting answers, they can monitor trends and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about the fact that, in call centers, they have turnover of, I think in some cases almost 100% a year. If you can do something to make someone's job more satisfying, less hectic, less stressful, those are good things. It's helping with staffing so that folks are less frustrated and they're getting paid. It is helping with escalations. It is helping with the customer experience teams that are thinking about journeys. Or if they can identify a trend, because like all of a sudden, like a lot of people are calling in, like, I don't know, not literally my power's out. That would be too easily like, hey, we've got a problem. Let's generate a proactive notification and get this out to folks and give them peace of mind rather than having, thousands of people call in and ask the same question. Right. So these are all things that we're, as a consumer, like, yeah, that's a better experience for me. And I think the folks in the seven, they're like, they feel better because they're better at their jobs.
One of the ideas, and Rob and I actually got into this early on, talking about the potential impact of an even earlier generation of AI. one of the ideas, I wonder if you agree with it, is that some jobs will be eliminated, because there are just roles that are no longer needed. You no longer need somebody to create summaries, for example. The computer can do that. The algorithm can do that. So one of the ideas is um, roles go away or tasks go away, but
Mhm.
the jobs can remain and evolve. Do you think that's a good way to think about it?
I do. I do. And I think for a couple of reasons, like I think even if we think about ourselves, there's so many things that we want to get done in a day and we get a fraction of those things done, right? So if it can enable us to do more things. And the other thing is, John, as we all think about, like machines don't replace humans. I agree with you. They may take on some tasks, they may take on some roles, but fundamentally, they don't have the same memory we do. They don't have the same power of observation. So yeah, they can listen, they can like see or listen to text or a voice and pick up
Uh-huh.
sentiment or intent, but they can't see, they can't smell, they can't touch yet today. They're not replacing humans,
They don't
even
have
if they are creating some efficiency in our jobs in the near term.
they don't have empathy.
No, they don't. They can fake it. They
Yeah,
can be trained to fake it, right? We
yeah.
just
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Julie. Back over to you, Andy.
Well, I think one way of I have a phrasing is rather than use the term artificial intelligence, started to use the term of silicon-based intelligence versus carbon-based intelligence.
Huh.
And carbon-based intelligence, people, living things, have a lot of the things that Julie was talking about: flexibility, adaptability. They have relatively low energy consumption. But I want to circle back to another aspect, which is the cost behind this stuff,
Mhm.
because it's not at all transparent. There literally are tens of billions of dollars that are going into these data centers
Mhm.
that are doing behind the scenes work that shows up in what Julie's talking about. Someone's going to have to make money from that. Then how is that going to materialize? How are they going to recoup their costs from that? It's a cost, I think, is going to flow first to companies who buy this technology, and then how they're going to turn around and monetize that. And well, it's nice to say that they're not going to do it by replacing people. If you're a company suddenly faced with a $10 million bill for this stuff, you're going to be looking at cutting out heads, not sorry, in order to recoup your cost. Uh, so the cost side of this is still not at all apparent. If you talk to any vendors about this, they're not talking about cost unless you really, really push them. And so it's the cost side, which to my mind is the thing which is scary. Because, as I said, billions of dollars going into infrastructure on this. It's got to get recovered somehow. And that's where the cost side needs to be focused on as much as the benefit side.
Yeah, so I think I don't know, and if I like take a step back from that, we talk about, and Rob and I have talked about this a bit too, right? A lot of companies have a lot of automation in place today that works just fine. There's a lot of deterministic or probabilistic, like not everything has to be generative. And you're right, inference is a variable cost today. Every time we use one of these tools, it costs money. It costs somebody money. It's interesting. So I went to a session last night put on by a company here in San Francisco called Interact, and they are creating, if we use agent in the term of not the billion things that Mark Benioff is building, but agent in terms of a chatbot and somebody engaging with the chatbot to resolve a problem they have. They are using what they call outcomes. They have people paying per outcome. And so the model that they're using is right. And certainly there's like the freemium element of when, it's a young company and you're just getting started, you get 300 outcomes per month for free. And then they're charging 99 cents per outcome. Because, the other part of what you're talking about is if I'm using these, whatever we're going to call them, like tools, and I'm paying for all this inference and I've got this variable cost, like we said, most companies don't want to take on like the risk of what is this going to cost me at the end of the month. But if you think about it in terms of, well, I'm paying like 99 cents per resolved customer question, I can put that into context of what kind of value does that create for me. And I think the other part of it is, and I think we've seen this with a lot of other technologies. Yes, there's all these companies in place that have like all this customer service, but there's like another side of this that if I'm a young company And there's like billions of dollars, right, going into young privately held companies. And I don't have to staff up with tens of thousands of customer service agents. How do the economics change of whatever service or product it is that I'm building or providing if I can handle customer questions a different way?
It's interesting that you raised the concept of outcomes, because uh, looking ahead to how the generative AI and the current generation of AI are going to affect applications. That's one really powerful idea. That you're not looking to build an application. You're looking to use technology to deliver an outcome,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can measure it, you can measure its value, then perhaps you could come up with an economic model. It's also, I think it's also going to be a challenge for developers to think in these terms. They're used to delivering features or delivering, a minimum viable product, or go to production and a production application. Delivering an outcome's different, but I think you're right that I think it's a really powerful idea, and it's interesting that it came out. It's coming out in your world as well.
Yeah,
But
and I think it's too like in the history of time, right? And we saw this, remember like back when mobile was like new, like 20, 25 years ago, these companies would like take your website and make it mobile. And then you were paying like per visitor and you're paying for traffic because people like, I need to like mitigate the risk. I'm not really sure about this mobile thing. And then they're like, wait a second, this thing's hugely successful. I don't want to pay these variable costs. And I think that's the way we're going to go. I mean, this idea of paying for input tokens and output tokens. I mean, I can't predict the future. I'm not saying that's dead, but that's not a commercial model that's going to go forward with consumers or businesses. Somebody's going to pay like they do today $20 a month to Google or to OpenAI and, have a set of expectations for what they get.
Yeah.
And the energy piece of it too. I mean, I don't want to be dismissive of that. I think it's, if you guys looked it up, is it like 3 to 5% of the energy that we're consuming is with using these tools today?
Yeah, Sam Altman just gave us some estimates on the cost of please and thank you, which we were always taught to do, right? Our parents taught us to say please and thank you, but it turns out it's very costly to say please and thank you.
Well, we
You
can't
know,
store the energy. We can't move it's like it's different. It's not that we don't have energy. It's just we don't have ways of storing it and moving it to the
right,
right places.
Yeah.
It's
right.
a
It's something we've turned something of a blind eye to as we've gotten maybe a little overexcited on this
well, you know
topic.
what? We don't have it for electric cars either. Like if we're all going to be driving electric cars, we have a different problem also.
Yeah. So, the other way I think we can maybe think about sort of value, we tend to think here at Analysis.tech about things in terms of process and operations, and customer facing or potentially patient, citizen facing process, employee facing. And, Julie, you did bring up a whole bunch of things that are sort of foreign to us in the sense of, here's this individual moment where something gets better for somebody because it's fundamentally more efficient. Here's something where you end up with a more effective outcome because there's, greater breadth of knowledge around how you're informing somebody, or greater immediacy. And these things can be measured actually reasonably well in the context of process. That's kind of what we do here at Analysis.tech. So, I'll break for our commercial now and just sort of say, if you want to, and there's an important part of this announcement, so everybody listen for just a few seconds. If you want to engage further with Analysis.tech, our chief economist, Andy Bartels, John Rymer, the godfather of low code, myself, who's focused on DPA, Francis Carden, the godfather of RPA, but a lot of godfathers here. Dave Marcus, business development guru, Rick Greenwald, a data guru, and Ryan Duguid, product strategy and expertise. And the piece I think that's maybe missing is the way you're thinking about things, Julie, and thinking about things in terms of user experience and how we have to think about users, because users interact with the stuff that we do, but I don't know that we're experts on it. And so the first thing, Julie, is how do our listeners find you?
Find me. So they could ask you. But no, so I am in the process of, as you know, getting my website up where I've got a lot of my content, and it's julieask.com, just julieask.com. And you could also use that email, julie@julieask.com.
So the really exciting news for folks is when we recognize a gap in our coverage and we think we could do things better, we try to do that. And so one of the things you could look for on julieasks.com as well as analysis.tech here in the near future is some joint research on this topic that we're talking about today. You'll be able to find it in both places. And we're really hoping for a long and close relationship in partnering with julieask.com. So you can find us at analysis.tech, find Julie at julieask.com. And so we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming here. All right, Julie, there's a lot of cool things going on in AI. We're being bombarded by, for lack of a better term, pundits who tell us if you don't do this, you're lost in the woods. Vendors who are talking about all the benefits. We do believe that there's a there there. We do believe that skepticism is a good thing to have at this point in the hype cycle, but we need to get started, right? So where would you advise people thinking about getting started, understanding the landscape, and getting some immediate value that they can build on?
So as somebody who comes at this from a user perspective, I think, I would say to anybody, and granted, like Rob, the two of us are sitting here in, Northern California, where it seems like everybody is using these tools all the time. I think, Pew Research just put out some data. It says like 27% of the people in the United States say they're using these tools constantly, I guess in their words, is to, jump in and use some of these tools and begin to get a feel for what they can do. I think it always surprises me what they can do. And then it always surprises me, how bad they can be sometimes. But I think that's part of it. And I think, you go back to the value propositions as you're an enterprise, as you're looking at where do my folks, where could I use more personalization? Because ultimately your employees are in a position of either they're assisting or helping other employees, or they're interfacing to your customer base. But where would more curated or contextual interactions be appropriate? Where can I get some superpowers? Where can I get some convenience or access? And, where can some of these things fit into my business? I think we have a colleague, James McQuivey, whom we all worked with at one point. It said, when new technologies come along, the first thing we do is we do old things in new ways. And it's not until we really internalize the technology that we start thinking about the new things that we're doing. And this goes back to the conversation, what John and I were talking about with enhancement. And I think that's why you see right now is when people think about Gen AI, they think about chatbots. That's the first thing that's in everyone's mind is, well, I can turn over my conversations and I can, everybody's going to interact with a chatbot. And that's okay. That's one of the things that we do, but I think we haven't really found what some of the other new things are. And I think the other thing, we're going to see is, as Andy alluded to, there's a little bit of this in almost any application, especially any enterprise application that we turn on. So, use it, trial it, be careful. And I think if your colleague were on the phone, he'd also say it's, be careful, be careful. You've got to, if you don't have quality data and you're not training with quality data, you're not going to get quality output.
Well, you could also introduce risk, right? I just want a quick follow-on question. So in the process of getting started, should IT, should legal, should HR, should governance, risk, and compliance, should they be beginning to weigh in on how and where we use these tools to reduce risk? Maybe which tools we use? Are we at that stage yet?
I'm gonna give you a yes and Rob. It feels, irresponsible. It was kind of like, if you go back 20 years ago, like bring your own device. Like everybody was bringing their own BlackBerry or whatever into the workplace. And then all of a sudden you had corporate data and emails on like tens of thousands of devices out in the universe that weren't secured, right? Passcodes came later. So I think it'd be irresponsible just to have, thousands of employees doing whatever they want. And this is moving so fast that your existing corporate processes for evaluating technology and solutions and data and all of the compliance and things that go with it are not going to keep up with the pace of this. This is yes, there have been a lot of transformational technologies in our lifetimes, and I think we'd all probably agree this is one of the fastest moving technologies in terms of impact that we've seen. I mean, unlike mobile, when it was mobile, we had to all go out and buy a device. It was expensive to go buy a device, to use it and pay for the service. This is free, and this works on all of our existing devices. You don't even have to have a good computer.
All right,
What I
research on the topic of governance coming from analysis.tech, and we'd love you to weigh in on that as we develop it, Julie.
yeah,
Sorry, John, go ahead.
what I'm hearing from you, Julie, is the disciplines of security and privacy, data protection, and so on, um, remain important, and it's important. It's important that those specialists within within the enterprise weigh in, but you can't do it the old way because things are moving so quickly. So adapting processes, um, you know, my my personal fear is that people who are not able to keep up will look at it and say it's too complicated, shut it down. That's not an answer either. So
And
anyway, does that
Jacques,
make sense?
I think it completely makes sense. And, like somewhere in this conversation, we talked about the idea of like agents replacing humans. So if you're going to have a staff that's partially humans, like partially agents, humans managing agents, then you need to think about the security and the identity and what these agents are running around and
Right,
doing. And
right.
so having employees, right, that are building their own agents to go off and do things and automate things. And yeah, I mean, use your imagination about how this, yeah.
Well, we'll get to that. Andy, over to you.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things which I'm conscious of, again, with my gray hair and everything, is an issue of age. That in terms of the client base out there, uh, younger people, digital natives, probably will embrace this more rapidly. But folks of my generation, gray-haired folks like this, probably won't as much. So how do companies think about that? How do they decide, we should really embrace this because so look at the demographics of our client base and say, gee, our clients are primarily older, so let's be slow. Or say, no, our clients are primarily digital natives, let's be fast. Is that part of the calculation as well?
1,000%. I mean, I think Andy is like such an important point. And as you guys know, I've studied all kinds of technology adoption habits and behaviors around consumers, whether it's smartphones or wearables or it's, headsets or whatever it may be. And adoption of new technology tends to peak when folks are around between like 25 and 35 years of age, right? There's this peak. And then there's this like downward linear curve as you get out to people that are older than 60, older than 70, older than 80. And so when you think about the experiences that humans have with technology, the first thing is nothing ever goes away. Rob and I were talking yesterday. I saw somebody use the Yellow Pages a year ago. Like that that artifact, that still exists, right? And I'm going to kind of make up the numbers now, but if you are a company, let's say in your your audience, let's say the median age is like 65 or 67, like 50 or 60% of them are going to prefer a phone call. And then like a few are going to do text. And then you get down to somebody who's, 18 or 20 and they don't want to talk to anyone. They're not going to make a phone call. The chatbot's like the best thing ever. Right. And so there's always going to be a mix of interfaces and a mix of ways that let's say you take the contact center are going to have to support, like phone's still going to be there, mail and email. And then there's like compliance issues. Right. And it's not even just chat, but is it chat on my website? Is it chat on OpenAI? If I have a customer service problem, am I going to go into Chat GPT and type it in and be like, help me fix like the modem that I have from Comcast? Right. But it's like there's over 300 digital touch points that consumers use today to engage with brands. And it's only growing. They aren't going away. So absolutely, you have to take into account like who you're serving, whether it's your employees, your customers,
Yeah.
when you're thinking about the interfaces and the tools that you give them.
That just sounds expensive. That
It's,
sounds
it's, worth-
expensive.
Well, or it's
it's worth your,
technology, or it's like, what do you call it? It's like headless architecture, right? So that you build like an intelligent thing that can go, engage people everywhere. But it is expensive, John, because people have different expectations if they're on WhatsApp versus they're making a phone call.
right. But it's worth remembering that the wealth gap, people over 55 probably have well over 70% of all the wealth in America.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're primarily targeting youngsters, well, they're not going to give you the same access to wealth as if you target older customers who have more wealth, but have those more traditional interface needs.
Huh.
Yeah, I think it's always worth, taking that into account. And, because I'm old, I also have gray discolor my hair, Andy. Whoever thought you'd be paying $200 a month for a smartphone bill to your telecom provider? That wasn't a thing. It
Right.
wasn't a thing to pay for internet or a thing to pay for cable when any of us were growing up. And now look at the money that goes out each month. It's probably several $100s for each of us to pay for
Right.
stuff that didn't exist when we were growing up,
Right.
Yep.
that we somehow find value from, and
So
we have to have
speaking
it.
so speaking of things that don't exist, let's look ahead. One of the things I always enjoyed about working with you, Julie, is that I'm much more confined by current reality in my mind than you are. So we talk there's serious talk and serious money going into things like driverless cars, and some people are talking about business processes that self-organize with the help of agents. There's all kinds of ideas out there, um, some of which I don't know. I'm more than a little skeptical. But
Mhm.
as you look at this, and particularly with your focus on individual consumers and employees, what are the things that really excite you? The possibilities for that AI open up that really excite you?
Okay, so I'm going to go outside of my scope and then I'll try to come back in my scope. First, since I live in San Francisco and these driverless autonomous vehicles have been running around my neighborhood we probably see like 2 or 3 per minute. That's how many are in my neighborhood.
Oh.
I'm like, thank goodness, because there's so many distracted drivers in San Francisco. I feel so much safer crossing the road with my dog when I see a Waymo coming than when I see a Tesla coming or a Subaru or something else like that. So thank you for the autonomous vehicles. I think the second thing is, just all of us, as we're aging and, we have friends with like health issues, just the idea, the massive compute power that this technology has to crank through like iterations and scenarios, whether it's like cancer treatments or more personalized treatments. I think just the contributions to science and especially healthcare, and not only finding answers faster, but lowering the cost of delivering that care, I'm, going to be eternally grateful for.
Mhm.
And then when I think it comes down to consumers, right? And I'll be the first to acknowledge we haven't seen like we haven't seen the Uber of mobile. We haven't seen like, like if we think about one of the biggest things that happened with smartphones, right, is it became our camera. And then we all started taking hundreds and hundreds of photos and like a whole ecosystem bridged off of that. I don't think we've seen the Gen AI version of that.
Mhm.
But what I do think about, let's say in the near term, while still looking forward, is, for a long time, I talked about this notion of experiences becoming more invisible. So when it's the convenience that you want, or it's like you're just trying to get something done, we don't want to engage with brands. We don't want to call them. We don't necessarily want to go to the store. We want more invisible experiences. And so the idea that an entity, this is core to my research, is this idea of a virtual personal assistant, something that would be able to get to know me and create more of this convenience in my life, is something that I look forward to, and we'll need these generative technologies to do it. I
Right.
mean, I don't know
Or
what. Go ahead.
or
Yeah.
or companion. You mentioned companionship.
I do. So that is an element of it, and I say that with a bit, and I think it's going to be a big space, right? I mean, and I feel like we could have a whole other conversation on what are some of the downsides.
Right.
Mhm.
So, on one hand, I like the idea of more convenience in my day. I like the idea that somebody who knows, and I say I shouldn't humanize it, but, a thing that knows me so well could create could take away some of the friction in my day. Just for example, I've been trying to set up a small business, and there's a lot of things I'm doing for the first time. I would love for some of that friction to go away, and technology can
Yeah.
do some of those things.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, if you want to go down the side of like, how is it harming us? We can go there, or we can save it for another day.
So
But virtual assistants is top of my list, John.
let's end it there and say maybe we set up another play date, and just for the fun of it, we talk about the downsides. Like, could we be the doomsayers instead of like predictions? Everything's going to be great. Predictions, everything's going to be crappy. So maybe that's a follow up. But Julie, thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me. It's fun. Thanks for
It's
good to be back
it has
again.
been so much fun. I hope the listeners enjoy it as much as we did. Again, look for Julie Ask at Julie Ask at julieask.com. Just ASK, JULIE, ASK.com. Find us at analysis.tech. And we'll look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of Lowdown on Low Code.